Do you think you know everything about the story of Adam and Eve? What if I told you there's something much greater behind this narrative, something that challenges everything you've ever imagined? No, we're not just talking about a religious interpretation, but a fascinating web of cultural influences, ancient traditions, and mysteries that connect to the Bible in surprising ways. And here's the most shocking part. This story doesn't begin in Eden, but centuries earlier in the Sumerian and Babylonian civilizations. What truly happened during creation? What is the hidden role of the serpent? And why do the trees of life and knowledge carry so much symbolism even today? This isn't just a story about a couple and a garden. It's a deep dive into traditions that have crossed generations, shaping not only Genesis, but also our entire perception of humanity, divinity, and the meaning of life. Get ready, because what you're about to discover will turn your perspective upside down. Let's uncover the hidden roots of these stories, revealing connections you never imagined. Want to understand how the distant past of Mesopotamia and Canaan shaped one of the most well-known narratives of all time? Then stay with me, because this journey promises to be unforgettable. When it comes to Genesis, many see it as an isolated and purely religious narrative, but the truth is that its roots are deeply intertwined with much older traditions. Archaeology has revealed that stories like the creation of the world and the flood have striking parallels in Sumerian and Babylonian myths. Think, for example, of the Sumerians, who spoke of gods creating humanity from clay. These narratives don't just echo in Genesis, they reveal how Mesopotamian cultures influenced biblical texts. This doesn't mean the Bible is merely a copy, but rather a mosaic of stories passed down through generations, reinterpreted to express a unique meaning. And speaking of the flood, who hasn't heard of the great deluge that marked the end of an era? This event, so central in Genesis, has glaring echoes in the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis myths. In these stories, Mesopotamian gods decide to punish humanity, but give a few chosen ones a chance to survive. Sound familiar? The Bible, with its narrative of Noah, takes these elements and transforms them into a moral and spiritual lesson, adapting ancient symbols to shape Canaanite culture and create traditions that resonate even today. This fusion of ancient traditions with biblical narrative is not only intriguing, but also makes us reflect on how the symbolism of chaos and order permeates human stories. After all, was Eden, with its sacred trees and serpent, a purely original creation? Or does it carry deep influences from Sumerian and Babylonian cultures? What is undeniable is that these stories hold powerful meaning, paving the way for us to explore Mesopotamian influences even further. It's astounding to realize how Mesopotamian accounts shaped some of the Bible's most famous stories. Take, for instance, the Atrahasis myth, which describes a great flood sent by the gods to destroy humanity, while one chosen man builds an ark to save his family and the animals. Doesn't this feel like a preview of Noah's story? What makes this connection even more fascinating is how the biblical narrative adjusts these elements to present not just punishment, but a promise of divine covenant. This detail transforms the story into something deeper, laden with spiritual and cultural symbolism. Another intriguing example is the Epic of Gilgamesh. In this epic, the character Utnapishtim recounts a version of the flood that bears unmistakable parallels with Genesis. However, while Mesopotamian accounts often focus on the whims and unpredictability of the gods, the Bible reframes the story to highlight God's justice and mercy. This shift is no coincidence. It reflects the intention to create a narrative that shaped Canaan's values and provided a moral foundation for Israelite traditions. These influences don't diminish the Bible's impact. On the contrary, they show how biblical writers were masters at reinterpreting ancient ideas, bringing new meaning to their traditions. By connecting with familiar myths in Mesopotamia, such as those of creation and chaos, Genesis becomes not just a spiritual account, but also a roadmap for understanding what united and differentiated these cultures. And it's in this context that we begin to see how elements like the serpent in Eden may have even deeper, more mysterious roots. The serpent in Eden has always been an intriguing symbol. But did you know its meaning goes far beyond what it seems at first glance? In ancient Mesopotamian cultures, serpents were often associated with primordial chaos, wisdom, and even immortality. In the Gilgamesh myth, for instance, a serpent steals the plant of life, depriving the hero of his immortality. This makes us wonder, does the serpent in Genesis also carry this symbolism, representing a rupture between humanity and the divine? It seems that the serpent was not merely a villain, but an archetype of choice and consequences. When we look at Sumerian texts, we find the serpent as an agent navigating between chaos and order. In some traditions, it personifies inevitable challenges in humanity's journey. Now think about this. In Eden, the serpent not only offers the fruit of the tree of knowledge, but also represents the possibility of knowing and questioning. It's as if it were saying, "Are you ready to face the weight of freedom?" Isn't it curious how, in various cultures, the serpent appears as a figure testing human limits? This duality reinforces the idea that nothing is entirely good or bad. It all depends on how we handle our choices. And here's an interesting provocation. Why is the serpent always so close to sacred trees? In Mesopotamia, there are accounts of serpents protecting temples or living near symbols of divine power, such as trees or mountains. This leads us directly to Eden, where the serpent and the trees of life and knowledge are inseparable. What makes this even more intriguing is that this connection between trees and serpents isn't unique to the Bible, but a recurring theme in cultures worldwide. Now the question is, what do these trees represent, and how does this connect to the next mystery in Genesis? Trees have always been powerful symbols in ancient cultures, and in Genesis, they play a central role with the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. But why these trees? In Mesopotamia, there are records of sacred trees representing a connection between the heavens, earth, and the underworld. One such figure appears on Sumerian cylinder seals, where a tree is surrounded by divine figures and animals. Doesn't that sound familiar? The tree of life in Eden seems to reflect this symbolism, not just as a source of immortality, but also as a point of spiritual connection. The tree of knowledge, on the other hand, carries an even more intriguing meaning. In Canaan, trees were associated with wisdom and fertility, and in various Babylonian traditions, certain fruits held mystical powers. When Eve chooses the fruit, she isn't merely disobeying, she's claiming a deeper consciousness, with all the implications it brings. It's interesting how, throughout history, the act of picking something sacred from nature is a recurring theme, whether in Eden or Mesopotamian traditions. This gesture symbolizes humanity's audacity to seek something beyond the permitted. More than just elements of a story, these trees are universal archetypes that transcend the Bible. They appear in myths, legends, and even religious practices as representations of life cycles, knowledge, and the sacred. And here comes the question. Was the Garden of Eden a unique creation, or was it inspired by ancient locations considered paradises? Some Mesopotamian myths speak of Dilmun, a pure and untouched land, which sounds like a prototype of Eden. Could we be getting closer to the origin of this mythical garden? The concept of a paradisiacal garden like Eden didn't arise out of nowhere. Many ancient cultures had stories about places of unparalleled beauty and purity. In Mesopotamia, for instance, we find the myth of Dilmun, described as a land without disease, death, or suffering. Doesn't that seem like an early description of Eden? This perfect land was seen as a point of connection between the gods and humanity, something that deeply resonates with the idea of the Garden of Eden as the place where God walked among humans. Isn't it curious how these myths reflect humanity's yearning for a lost paradise? Another intriguing influence comes from Ugaritic myths, where sacred mountains were described as divine dwellings. These mountains, seen as the link between the heavens and the earth, were often surrounded by lush gardens. The Bible, by situating Eden in the east, seems to dialogue with these images. Elevated places and fertile gardens symbolize both proximity to the divine and the harmony of creation. To this day, the idea of mountainous paradises remains present in various cultures, showing how this archetype transcends time and space. These mythical locations weren't just imaginary. They were based on real geography and beliefs. Many scholars believe Eden might have been inspired by real regions in Mesopotamia, near the Tigris and Euphrates rivers mentioned in the Bible. Imagine a place where nature flourished in perfect harmony, feeding the traditions and cultures of the time. This connection between the mythical and the real makes us reflect. Could the narratives of creation and humanity also carry influences as broad as these descriptions of sacred gardens? One of the most fascinating elements of the biblical narrative is the creation of Adam from clay, a theme that echoes deeply in Mesopotamian mythological traditions. In the Atrahasis myth, the gods create the first humans by mixing clay with the blood of a sacrificed god. This detail not only establishes a parallel with Genesis, but also highlights how humanity was seen as a divine creation, a link between the earthly and the spiritual. This connection between clay and life symbolizes not only our humble origins, but also our direct bond with the earth. These creation narratives also appear in Sumerian myths, where the god Enki molds clay figures to give rise to humanity. This similarity makes us wonder, was the author of Genesis reinterpreting these traditions to convey a more specific message? In Genesis, God breathes the breath of life into Adam, introducing the idea of a divine soul. It's an adaptation that not only differentiates the biblical account, but also deepens it, elevating humans from mere creatures to beings with divine purpose. These stories don't stop there. The symbolism of clay goes further, representing both our fragility and our potential. Ancient cultures saw clay as the raw material of life, something that could be shaped but also broken. This metaphor is so powerful that even today, expressions like "made from the dust of the earth" remain loaded with meaning. And as we look at these connections, we see that biblical creation is much more than an isolated narrative. It's a reflection of cultural influences that intertwine, leading to modern interpretations of how these traditions shaped our worldview. Modern interpretations of Genesis lead us to see these narratives in a completely different light. Researchers suggest that many elements, such as the Garden of Eden and the creation of Adam and Eve, are reinterpretations of much older mythological traditions. For example, the symbolism of the Tree of Life and the Tree of Knowledge dates back to sacred Mesopotamian imagery. The way these elements were adjusted in Genesis not only made them more accessible to the audience of the time, but also gave them a unique and profound character. It's as if the biblical text were transforming ancient symbols into timeless spiritual lessons. An interesting point is how these narratives continue to resonate with current issues. For instance, the concept of the lost paradise is often compared to the modern yearning for balance with nature and a state of inner harmony. The influences of the Sumerians and Babylonians weren't mere copies, but starting points for creating a unique spiritual identity. This makes us think about how, by reinterpreting ancient traditions, the Bible offered a new perspective on the relationship between humanity, the divine, and the cosmos. It's a powerful reminder that the past is always present, shaping how we view the world. Finally, these reinterpretations also show us that the Bible, while inspired by ancient myths, transcends these influences. It takes elements like the serpent, clay, and sacred trees, and transforms them into living metaphors filled with spiritual meaning. This opens the door to modern reflections. How do these archetypes still apply to our lives? Are knowledge, chaos, and creation merely ancient themes, or do they remain central to humanity's quest for meaning? It is this quest, after all, that keeps Genesis so relevant and fascinating. Now that you know the roots and secrets behind the story of Adam and Eve, an important question arises. What will you do with this knowledge? Does it change the way you see Genesis, the Bible, and even our own history? The connections we've explored here show that nothing in the world is isolated. Every symbol, every myth, and every narrative has a purpose. And it's up to you to decide how this impacts your life. Is it time to question more, explore further, and open your mind to new possibilities? If everything you've heard here has made you think, then don't let it pass. Ask yourself, how do these ancient stories continue to shape what we believe today? And more importantly, what do they teach us about who we are and where we're headed? Adam and Eve are more than characters in a book. They are reflections of the human journey, our choices, our mistakes, and our quest for the sacred. What would you do if you were in their place? Would you seek knowledge or avoid the risk? If you want to keep uncovering stories as profound and fascinating as this one, subscribe to the channel now and activate notifications. That way, you won't miss any videos and will continue exploring these mysteries that connect the past to the present. Don't forget, knowledge transforms, and together we can go even further. So what will be the next mystery we explore? See you in the next video.